The Dearest Little Woman in the World, Letters of Olivia Clemens to her sister, Susan Crane. Our topic tonight is sisters. Perhaps you know one. Perhaps you are one. Perhaps you wish you had one. Perhaps you wish you didn't. Our specific set of sisters under examination tonight, namely Olivia Louise Langdon Clemens and Susan Dean Langdon Crane, once shared the very space we occupy here tonight. Maybe they sat where you are sitting tonight. First, some biographical context on the older of the two sisters, Susan Dean Langdon Crane. This information provided by Gretchen Charlow, Director Emerita of the Center for Mark Twain Studies at Elmira College, and a former member of the Park Church. She writes, Susan Crane was the adopted daughter of Jervis and Olivia Lewis Langdon. Records show that Susan knew of her adoption and most likely spoke openly about it, particularly when she was a young woman. Susan was born February 18, 1836 in Spencer, New York. Her mother, Mary Andress Dean, died when Susan was 1, and her father, Colonel Elijah Dean, died when Susan was 4. She was not the only child left without parents following the deaths of Mary and Elijah. Correspondence between Dean family members suggests that there were 4 orphaned children. It was likely through Jervis's sister-in-law that he and Olivia Lewis Langdon learned of the possibility of adopting young Susan, who was now about 4 years old. At this point, Jervis and Olivia had been married 5 years and had no children, and upon learning of the deaths of both Dean parents, they reached out to adopt Susan, probably around 1840. The exact date of Susan's adoption is unknown, but a 27 March 1845 letter mentions Susan playing in the yard and a hope that she would do well in school. Susan's childhood with her adopted parents began on 2nd Street in Elmira, where Jervis and Olivia rented a small house for a few months. The Langdon move to Elmira was prompted by the presence of the Chemung Canal and lumber, and with Sylvester G. Andrus, Jervis established the Andrus and Langdon lumber business near the canal. By the fall of 1845, the Langdons had moved from the rented house and had purchased the house on the corner of East 3rd and Union Streets. According to Susan Crane, Olivia Louise Langdon was born in that house on 27 November 1845, approximately 5 years after Susan's adoption. Susan reminisced about the early home and her memories of baby Olivia in a letter she wrote to Samuel after Olivia's death. Yesterday, I went to a house on 3rd Street. In coming away, the young woman who I called said, "This is the old Langdon house." I could hardly believe it, as the house was faced another way, was added to, etc. I was taken to the largest first-floor room, said to have been the old parlor. In the large windows, the heavy door and window casings, there was a familiarity. Still, I could not be sure, and I said to the woman who had known the house from her childhood, "If you will show me a certain little window cut under the eaves, I will believe." "Oh yes, that we call the cubby, and it is in the attic. I can show it to you." Sure enough, there it was, cut at my request in a dark room where I slept in the spring of 1846 or 7. When the big parlor window at Quarry Farm was made, it did not give me more joy, if as much. A large part of the joy of the small window was the light. A still larger joy was in the fact that I was allowed to take baby Libby up to that room, seat her on a chair on the inside next to the window while I sat outside with a chair in the front as a horse. In this way, we took long journeys to Ithaca and other points of interest, while you and Huck Finn and others were having some of your fun. To have that dear little girl to myself near that window was joy enough, making me very rich. She, too, was happy in the play. Both Susan and Olivia attended the Elmira Elmira Female Seminary, founded in 1847 by Clarissa Thurston. The 1851 annual catalog stated the mission of the school. This institution is designed to furnish young ladies with an opportunity to acquire a thorough scientific education, and at the same time to aid them in the formation of such a character as shall fit them for the active duties of life. Surviving records show Olivia Langdon in the preparatory department at age 6, 10, and 12 years old. Susan was awarded a Certificate of Merit on March 31st, 1853, at the age of 17. On December 7th, 1858, when Olivia was 13 years old, the Reverend Thomas K. Beecher officiated at the marriage of 21-year-old Susan to 27-year-old Theodore Crane in the Langdon house on 3rd Street. Olivia probably observed the marriage of her older sister and Theodore with joy, and perhaps hoped for similar good fortune for her own future. Theodore, a local businessman, was the son of Hiram and Anne Eliza Crane, leading citizens in Elmira and owners of a prosperous lumber company, and, like the Langdons, avowed anti-slavery people who, together with the Langdons, broke from Elmira's first Presbyterian church and founded the independent Congregational Church, this Park Church, in 1846. Following their December marriage, Theodore began working for his father-in-law in Jervis's expanding coal businesses, managing his interests in the Washington, D.C. area for several years. By the time Susan and Theodore returned from Washington, the Langdons had moved into their larger home at Church and Main in November of 1862, Langdon Plaza today, just across the street. The house was soon enlarged into a stately home with a separate area for the Cranes, and notably was the first house in Elmira to have running water. During those same years, when Susan and Theodore were living in Washington, D.C., and then returned to Elmira, and when Olivia's parents purchased and moved into their Church and Main Street home, Olivia experienced health challenges. For 2 years, she struggled to recover from a back injury that required treatment in a care facility in New York City. Following braces and rehabilitation, Olivia briefly came home to Elmira, but then returned for additional treatment. By age 22, Olivia reached a level of stable health and activity. And significantly, Olivia's younger brother, Charles, made a life-changing acquaintance with a humorous traveling companion, Samuel Clemens, or Mark Twain, while both were traveling to Europe and the Holy Land on the Quaker City steamer. On that trip, Charles famously showed Samuel a small photo of his older sister, and the rest, as they say, is somewhat generally known literary history. Samuel Clemens eventually marrying Olivia Langdon and writing some of his most important books here in Elmira at Quarry Farm atop East Hill. Before we review selected excerpts from Olivia's letters, let's pause to consider the title of this paper, "The Dearest Little Woman in the World," a descriptive phrase Olivia repeatedly called her sister. Mark Twain scholar Alan Gribben, in his masterwork, Mark Twain's Literary Resources, suggests that Olivia's greeting, "Little Woman," may acknowledge the publication and impact of Little Women on the two sisters. Little Women had appeared in 2 parts in 1868 and 1869, and likely Olivia and Susan both read and enjoyed Alcott's novel. Olivia calls her sister a little woman affectionately in 5 letters between 1872 and 1875. Gribben also notes that years later, for Christmas of 1880, when daughter Susie was 8, daughter Clara was 6, and daughter Jean was still a babe, Clemens received a bill for the purchase of Little Women, a book the Clemens daughters would probably by then have been old enough to enjoy, perhaps as their mother and aunt had done years earlier. On now to excerpts from letters written by Olivia to her sister. There are slightly more than 50 extant letters written by Olivia to Susan from a total letter collection numbering well over 600. Perhaps some of the correspondence between the sisters was lost or destroyed. We cannot know. We do know that Olivia wrote regularly to her mother, and likely those letters written to their mother were shared with Susan. Then, too, the sisters were often literally, physically close. Susan and their mother, Olivia Sr., after all, resided at the same address for many years, the Cranes occupying a wing of the Langdon mansion until they began their full-time residency at Quarry Farm. Then, too, the sisters spent many summers together at Quarry Farm, and Susan and Theodore visited in Hartford often enough. Live conversations and visits would clearly have been the preferred method of communication. All these reasons contributed, perhaps, to the smaller number of letters between the sisters. The largest number of letters are written when Olivia travels internationally and writes home to her sister. In an early letter written February 12, 1870, barely 2 weeks after Samuel and Olivia married, Olivia collectively writes her mother, her sister, and her father all together from their new home on 472 Delaware Avenue in Buffalo. The house, a wedding present from Olivia's parents to the new bride and groom. Dear Father, or Mother, or Sue, who shall I address this letter to? I would like to have a visit with each of you. I am perfectly happy in this new home. Still, I do not yet love the rooms in it as well as I do those in the maiden home, I suppose because they are not so full of association. We are always so glad to get letters from home. We are thankful for fathers, mothers, Sues. Following blissful early days of marriage, a series of difficult events begin to unfold for the newlyweds. Olivia's father, Jervis Langdon, struggles with sickness and dies of stomach cancer. Olivia's girlhood friend from Elmira, Emma Nye, comes to visit Elmira and Samuel in Buffalo, contracts typhoid fever, and dies in Olivia and Samuel's bed. Olivia discovers she is pregnant, happily, although her pregnancy is a difficult one, and gives birth prematurely to their firstborn son, Langdon, named in honor of his deceased grandfather. Eventually, Olivia also contracts typhoid fever, and then she is pregnant with their second child. In March of 1872, a daughter is born, Olivia Susan, her first name honoring her mother and grandmother, and her second, by which she was called throughout her life, Susan or Susie, honored her aunt, Olivia's sister, Susan Crane. 3 months following Susie's birth, on 2 June 1872, Langhorne Clemens dies of diphtheria. Olivia writes her sister from a vacation spot on the Connecticut shore, where Samuel and Olivia and baby Susie have gone, seeking rest and perhaps some relief from their loss. Susie, darling, I do so want to see you. You certainly are the dearest little woman in the world. Oh, my little Susie does grow in grace and sweetness every day, and I am so thankful that her name is Susie. You would enjoy her now. She coos and laughs and looks so wise. I do not know what I could do without her. She is such a comfort to me. I think her eyes may grow like Langdon's. They are lighter now than they were when we left home. Night before last, I felt as if I must go and fix Langdon's grave, as if it was all I could do, and I longed to do that. He was so rarely beautiful. This house is full of children, but there is none like him. I cannot help a bitter pang when I think how the child would reach to go from me. I think I was very weak to permit it. Sunday, August 4th. This letter has been commenced to you for more than a week, and how much I have thought of and longed for you in those days. Sometimes it has seemed as if I must go home before I am settled for the winter. I want to go to my Langdon's grave. Oh, I do so long for the little fellow. Yet I do feel so entirely unworthy of him, so as if I was not fit to be the mother of such a child. Sue, tell me about his little grave. Whoops. Okay. Sue, tell me about his little grave. I suppose what we want is 2 little stones, one for the head and one for the foot. Oh, how I loved him, yet how he always kept me at a distance. That frightful cold. I wonder if he could have stayed with us if it had not been for that. My little baby is such a comfort to me. Sue, do not think of me as always sad. I am not so. I have great comfort in those are left to me. Only I feel so often as if my pathway was to be from this time forth lined with graves. Sometimes I am thankful that he is gone. And Sue, I know that I get along with it easier than most mothers could. Sometimes I think I do not feel as intensely as most mothers do. It is 2 years tonight since Mr. Stanley was with Father. What a frightful night that was. Oh, Sue, how I love you, and what a grand, helpful nature yours is. It seems sometimes as if I cried more, it would be a relief. I say again, don't think of me as always sad. I have many cheerful, happy times. Love to Theodore. I hope I shall be at the farm next summer. Olivia frequently reveals her hope to spend summers at Quarry Farm. Following the death of Jervis Langdon, Quarry Farm had been deeded to Susan Crane. Jervis had purchased the property with the hope that the hilltop location would provide the family a summer retreat from the heat of downtown Elmira. In 1872, faced with the possibility that she may need to travel to England with Samuel as he negotiates concerns with his London publisher, Olivia expresses her longing to be with Susan in Elmira, writing from Hartford. Sue, I love you with all my heart. Your letter has just come. I could not help just a little feeling of satisfaction that you felt so badly at the thought of our not being with you. I cannot realize that anyone should want us, me at least, so much. I would infinitely prefer to be at the farm next summer to being anywhere else in the world, if Mr. Clemens could be there with me, but I do not know how to live so much without him. At the end of her letter, Olivia adds a phrase of simple remembrance. Sue, today is Langdon's birthday. Months later, Olivia and Samuel sell their Buffalo home, purchase property in Hartford, Connecticut, and begin construction on their Hartford home. As the work begins, Olivia, Samuel, toddler Susie, Olivia's friend, Clara Spaulding, and nurse Nellie Birmingham travel to England and Scotland. Olivia describes the antics of little Susie to her namesake. She can trot all about. She goes in such a hurry when she tries to go alone that she is almost sure to tumble down just from her haste, and she is so delighted that she can trot that she makes the greatest crowing. It is so pretty to see her. She says baby very plain and can kiss now as well as anyone. As the weeks pass, Olivia begins to feel anxious to return home, possibly partly because she is aware that she is pregnant with their third child. Darling Sue, I have been looking forward for several days to today when I should have an opportunity of visiting with you. How I do wish the visiting could be done face to face. I do so often wish to be at the farm, looking off at the view and visiting with my own darling old Sue, and with my little Sue trotting about the room. Oh, Sue, the little child is such a comfort to us. You cannot imagine unless you see her. She is so very happy and full of good spirits. Remember me to Auntie Cord and the rest. Auntie Cord, Marianne Cord, was the beloved cook at Quarry Farm. Months pass. The family returns from England to Hartford and then summers in Elmira. In June of 1874, at Quarry Farm, Olivia gives birth to their third child, a daughter, Clara Langhorne Clemens, named Clara after Olivia's Elmira friend and traveling companion, Clara Spaulding. Now mother of two little girls, Olivia writes after returning to their Hartford home. Sue, my darling, I do so wish that you could see Susie this minute. The other night when she was ready to say her prayers, I said, Susie, who's that you pray to? She said, Jesus. Then after a pause, is Jesus a fellow, Mama? She calls Jack Frost a nice little fellow and Santa Claus a jolly fellow. Clara is the sweetest, best little thing that I ever saw, but Susie certainly is a rare little daughter. Susie remembers her summer at the farm very well. She speaks quite often of Auntie Cord. Sue, dear, I do love you and do so want to see you. From the balcony of their Hartford home on an early November afternoon, darling Sue, how I do wish you were sitting beside me, that we might visit together. I am seated on the west balcony of the billiard room. It is an exceedingly mild day. I feel away up here somewhat as you do at the farm, as if I was above the world and its woes. The atmosphere is very hazy, and it makes the autumn tints even more soft and beautiful than usual. Oh, how I do want you. It is so lovely. Susie, dear, your last letter was such a comfort to me the night before it came. I had been thinking very much about you, feeling very thankful for your love, and realizing how very much such love is to us here in this world. Oh, Sue, I do love you so deeply, and it was such a comfort to have you express so your love for me. Write me some more such letters. I like them. Yesterday morning, in regulating in the billiard room, I came across something that reminded me so strongly of Langdon that I was feeling badly. Susie was with me, and I said, Susie, come and comfort Mama. Little brother Langdon has gone away, and I want him. Gone away from Koo? I'm sorry. Never mind, Mama. He come back in a minute. Then he won't go from us anymore. When I asked her where Langdon is, she said, up in Jesus. I wish you could see the children. They are so sweet and dear. Remember me to Auntie Cord. Time passes. The children grow. 3 years later, in the spring of 1878, Samuel and Olivia, Susie and Clara Spalding, and the German nursemaid, Rosina Hay, again embark on an 18-month European tour. Olivia and Samuel close their Hartford home and hope to economize expenses while living abroad. They release their servants and leave coachman Patrick McAleer and his family to care for their vacant home. Samuel aspires to write more productively in Europe. From Frankfurt on the Main, Sue, my darling, baby Clara is always the first one to enter every hotel, marches right up the stairs without waiting for any of us to go with her. Clara and I have been perfectly convulsed to see her. She told her Aunt Clara the other day that the reason that she sucked her thumb was that God told her to. Susie said to me yesterday that she wished Rosa was made in English. Sue, dear, I cannot endure the idea of my letters traveling around. I want to put love and family matters in just when I think of them and move to. It is exceedingly distasteful to think of anyone else seeing them. It gives me the cold horrors to think of the gentlemen seeing them. You must do as you think best, but the idea of others seeing them curtails me very much. How I do love you, dear, dear people in Elmira. I think I have been more contented today than any day since I left home. And if I could know that you and Mother would live yet many years, I think I should be very happy. But some way I have such an apprehension about you two dear people. Last night, in the night, I lay awake with the horrors lest something should happen to some of you at home, and I so far away. Another letter from Heidelberg. The beauties of this place grow on us instead of diminishing. Oh, I wish so incessantly that you could be here to enjoy it with us. Such a restful place as it would be to you. I so often wish for you the entire rest of spirit that you would have here. Even the poor people that get to you at the farm could not get to you here, and there would be no housekeeping perplexities. When I think of Hartford, there is a strong desire to see the people, but an instant disinclination to return because of the housekeeping. But when I think of the farm, there is a great desire to see the people, and a great desire, too, for the place, with no dread, with nothing but a great longing to fly there. Oh, that farm is a wonderful boon to us all. How I wish there was not that terrible ocean to cross. The children are as happy as the day is long here. The grass is full of wildflowers. I have a constant desire to send some to you, such beautiful white bell-shaped flowers, a great deal of that fine white flower that grows along by the roadside with us, that you used to gather so much last summer. I suppose it must be the same that you put with the apple blossoms in the church. Do write me about the flowers. Write me about everything. I hope you will have been settled at the farm for 2 weeks when this reaches you. Olivia's reference here to the apple blossoms in the church may strike a familiar chord here tonight. Susan's devotion to this, the Park Church, is well known. She cared for the communion table and also provided floral arrangements for the church every Sunday, missing only once, and was known as Our Lady of the Flowers. Clearly, Olivia was aware of her love of flowers and of her providing the flowers here every Sunday. Again from Heidelberg. The children troubled me a good deal quarreling together, and tonight I said to Clara, "Why don't you let Susie play with your ball?" She said, "Well, Susie wants it for mine and hers, and that I cannot have." Do write me all about the farm when you get up here, the dear, dear farm, when you get up there, the dear, dear farm, what good times we do have there. And you have put a grate in our room. Why, Sue, I didn't dream of your doing such a thing. How delightful it must be. Tell me who sleeps there this summer, what guests you have in it. I hope you won't have a great deal of company. I thank you so much for the sermon. I have not read it yet. Clara and I are going to read it together. Oh, Sue, dear, strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many shall seek to enter in and shall not be able. I am not striving these days. I am just interested in German, and I think so little of anything else. I wish I had your and Mother's spirits. You are both so much better than I am. It seems as if you might help me in, but you can't, when I know how to do so much better than I do. Write me and pray for me. I want to be good, but I don't try hard. I feel rebellious when I read what you wrote of Mr. Beecher's, saying that eternal life was a gift and not a thing that we could earn. What is the use then in trying? Goodness is the only thing worthwhile, the only thing of any account. Why don't I work for it then? From Heidelberg, Olivia again reveals her longing for Auntie Cord's cooking. Sue, darling, I can't begin to tell you what a comfort the home letters are. The food here, I am sure, would not do for Mother. At least we have grown tired of it. How I would like to sit down to one of Auntie Cord's breakfasts. It would seem absolutely perfect to me. Tell Auntie Cord with my very sincere regards that she forgets that we make coffee over spirit lamps and that we don't have her facility for having boiling water and plenty of fresh eggs, and I do believe that cream is a thing unknown in Germany. More than 10 years elapse between extant letters, and many changes occur. In 1880, the Clemenses welcome their fourth child, Jane Lambton, named after Samuel's mother. Samuel begins to diversify his investments, including Kaleiatype and eventually the Page Compositor. And Susan faithfully invests in all of her brother-in-law's business efforts. In 1884, Samuel launches his own publishing house, putting his nephew, Charles Webster, in charge and naming the firm Charles L. Webster and Company. The company published all of Mark Twain's books, from Adventures to Huckleberry Finn to Tom Sawyer Abroad, as well as other works, including the personal memoirs of U.S. Grant. But the company's fortunes declined rapidly in time. Olivia turned 40 in 1885, and Samuel turned 50. 3 years later, in September of 1888, a major turning point for the entire family occurred when Theodore Crane suffered a stroke. The family cared for him, and the Cranes spent time in Hartford and New York City seeking treatment, but he struggled with ongoing physical pain and depression. Despite much care by Susan and Olivia and repeated treatments by doctors, Theodore died at Quarry Farm on July 3rd, 1889. Time passes again and more changes occur. In the fall of 1890, Susan Clemens leaves home to attend Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, but completes only one semester. Samuel and Olivia both lose their mothers. The following summer, facing severe financial worries, the Clemenses again close their Hartford house, and the entire family leaves America for a period of retrenchment in Europe that will last until mid-1895. The financial calamities that befall the Clemens family during this time are well known, stemming in part from the widespread financial panic of 1893, as well as from poor money management and investment strategy on the part of Samuel. Once again, the family seeks to live more economically in Europe. Despite these efforts, their finances crumble as the publishing company collapses. Olivia confides to her sister. The hideous news of Webster and Company's failure reached me by cable on Thursday, and Friday morning, Gagliani's messenger had a squib about it. Of course, I knew it was likely to come, but I had great hope that it would be in some way averted. Mr. Rogers was so sure that there was no way out but failure that I suppose it was true. But I have a perfect horror and heart sickness over it. I cannot get away from the feeling that business failure means disgrace. I suppose it always will mean that to me. We have put a great deal of money into the concern, and perhaps there would have been nothing but to keep putting it in and losing it. We certainly now have not much to lose. We might have mortgaged the house. That was the only thing I could think of to do. Mr. Clemens felt that there would never be any end, and perhaps he was right. Sue, if you were to see me, you would see that I have grown old very fast during this year. I have wrinkled. Most of the time I want to lie down and cry. Everything seems to me so impossible. I do not make things go very well, and I feel that my life is an absolute and irretrievable failure. Perhaps I am thankless, but I so often feel that I should like to give it up and die. However, I presume that if I could have the opportunity, I should desire at once to live. The following year, the family devises a plan to get out of debt and maintain their good name. Samuel will embark on an around-the-world lecture tour to pay his creditors dollar for dollar. Olivia will rent their Hartford home. Returning to America after 4 years abroad, the family spends several months at Quarry Farm, gaining strength for the ambitious task that lies ahead. In August of 1895, Olivia, Samuel, and Clara depart on their global journey and bid farewell to Susie and Jean, who remain together under the care of Susan Crane at Quarry Farm. The family plans to reunite in England the following spring at the end of the tour. Despite the weight of their financial losses, Olivia's letters mostly exude strength and delight as she travels the world with Samuel and Clara. On September 5th, 1895, aboard the RMS Warramoo, on their way to Australia. Sue, my darling, this afternoon about 4 we shall cross the equator. Does that not make us seem many miles away from you all? It is most beautiful in these tropical seas. We have had most glorious moonlight nights, and the night before last we watched the eclipse of the moon. Clara has seen a meteor, but I have not as yet been so fortunate. 1 or 2 days we had flying fish all about the ship, but I did not get a glimpse of them. When I would come up on deck, they would evidently hide themselves in the sea. It seems so very difficult to write on shipboard. The motion, the absence of ideas, and the sleepiness all together make writing very difficult. This sparkling, exquisite water, I wish you could look on it. Today is the 5th, and I suppose on the 11th, Jean will begin her work at the college. I have many qualms of homesickness for you all. It seems to me that when we get through with this trip, we shall be pretty anxious to remain at home. Months later, from New Zealand. Sue, darling, just think, in 3 days I shall be 50 years old. Oh, dear me. I wonder if we shall ever get our debts all paid and live once more in our own house. Today it seems to me as if we never should. However, much of the time I believe we shall, but it is a long way. Mr. Clemens continues to have large and very enthusiastic houses. Here he has had a large hall and he has had 1,000 people to hear him each night. In fact, the two nights counted up 2,172 people who paid for their seats. That did not count the newspaper people, nor me. He reads here one more night. As they near Bombay, India, Olivia writes from the Indian Ocean, "Sue, darling, tomorrow about 2 o'clock we expect to reach Bombay. We left Colombo day before yesterday at 4 o'clock. We had a rough time the first night after leaving Colombo, and it made me feel that I detested ship travel. Yesterday morning when we wakened, it was like a river and made us find a charm in the ship life. It is warm, very warm, like one of our August days, and now we sit on deck with the very thinnest clothing that we have. Last night, Clara and I came out on the deck. The steward brought up our mattresses, and we stayed there until 6 o'clock this morning. It was a perfectly glorious night. My airbed made me entirely comfortable. I felt that Clara's bed was rather hard, but she slept soundly all night. We had to get up and go to our staterooms at 6 o'clock this morning, and they seemed intolerably hot. Now at 10, the deck and every part of the ship is hot. Last night, or very early this morning, Jupiter was so bright that it made a brilliant wake in the water. How I do long to have you see all the things we see, but I should hate to have you subjected to all the discomforts. Colombo is the most fascinating, picturesque place I have ever seen. Oh, the moving, changing pictures are something marvelous. They tell us that Bombay is still more interesting in this way. The freedom and grace of these dark people with their bronze-like skins is an unceasing delight to the eye. In Colombo, the soil is a dark, rich red, and it seems to be exactly the right background for the pictures that are made. Of course, the tread of the servants is absolutely noiseless, as they are all without shoes or stockings. 6:30. We have just had a most glorious sunset, deep, wonderful red, with the new moon in the sky and the evening star halfway between the horizon line and the moon. Winter. How ridiculous it seems to say winter when we are in this broiling heat. As they leave India, Sue, darling, during the past days I have been so full of thoughts of you all at home. When, however, I think of the list of creditors and the money to be paid, I feel that our going home and inhabiting our own house is far in the distance, very, very far. You know I have pretty good courage, but sometimes it comes over me like an overwhelming wave that it is to be bitterness and disappointment to the end. Perhaps I should not write in this way, but for the last few days I have been so full of it. Still, most of the time I keep up my courage. Mr. Clemens has not as much as I wish he had, but poor old darling, he has been pursued with colds and inabilities of various sorts. Then he is so impressed with the fact that he is 60 years old. Naturally, I combat that thought all that I can, trying to make him rejoice that he is not 70. I wish that I could sit down on the veranda with you for a little time. I realize and appreciate that we have had much more than our share of the good things of this life, and I try not to fret, even if we can never get back into our house again and live in our old way. Don't let this letter trouble you, Sue dear, in the very least, because you know I am very elastic. Once Samuel, Olivia, and Clara reach South Africa, their intention to meet Susie and Jean in England begins to take shape, although Olivia admits that the plans are liable to be changed at any time. The children must not feel too sure about coming, but now it seems as if we should go to England on the 15th of next month. Of course, Mr. Clemens feels that he must make all the money that he can, for we long so to be out of the bondage of debt. It seems as if we should have to work a very long time yet before we should be free. $40,000 or $50,000 is a very large sum of money to try to earn. Olivia's last letters to her sister home here in Elmira from their round-the-world trip now evoke pathos, since we, as modern readers, are aware of the sorrow that is to come. Our plans seem a little more certain. We should like the children ready to start by an American line on or after the 5th of August. She adds, although I want them ready, I don't want them really to start until we send a cable saying, come. Because if they started before getting a cable from us, they might find us in the bottom of the sea when they reach England. Olivia closes her letter. Still not a line from Susie. Letters came today from Orion and Molly. She adds a P.S. There has just this moment reached another mail. Still not a line from Susie. Olivia's repeated awareness that she has not heard from Susie anticipates events unfolding at home. Susie will die of meningitis in Hartford before Olivia can see her again. Olivia's last three communications to her sister underscore her pain at the unexpected loss of Susie. Susan comments that Olivia is ashamed to write letters now because she can write only about one thing, Susie, and it seems so weak and childish. She says Clara and Jean are neither of them well. She hopes when the dark London winter is over and the bright days come, they will feel better. A year and a half later, Olivia writes Susan from Austria, mentioning another great worry, Jean's increasingly frequent epileptic seizures. Jean has her ups and downs. On Friday, she had a very bad day. She had no falling time, but it seemed as if she were almost the same as unconscious all day long. Sometimes I am deeply discouraged about her. Then sometimes she goes for several days without a sign or symptom of absent-mindedness. Poor, dear little Jean. What an intolerably hard world it seems most of the time, and to the great majority of people. Yet how much I have to be thankful for. You must charge me for every bit of the work on Susie's grave. If there is any money left, don't give it to Charlie, but keep it for flowers for her grave. Olivia's last extant letter to her sister is written from Vienna. Sue, darling, it seems very, very long since I have written you. Every morning I think, today a letter shall go to Sue. But much company, many ways to go have prevented me. Then, too lately, I have not been quite well. I have been having a bad time with my back. It is rheumatism or gout in the back. At night I cannot sleep or lie in any comfortable position. In the day it is better, the pain not so severe. The moving about seems good for it. I have the doctor for it, but nothing seems to do any good. Now I am going to try Mr. Clemens's gout remedy. I wish I could have been with you when you had grip. Perhaps I should have been able to be a little comfort to you. I understand so well how you would dread to go back into the world again. How often I long to talk with you about our experiences here. So often the things are too long to write about, but would be just right to tell. February 1st, nearly my wedding day. February 2nd, our wedding day. It is useless to try and write. I'm going to send this note to tell you that we are well, and I will write you in a day or two. In deepest love. Yours always, Livy. The relationship between Olivia and Susan was deep and true. The fact that they were not biological sisters mattered not a bit. Susan steadfastly supported and cared for her younger sister, her brother-in-law, and her nieces. The atmosphere provided at Quarry Farm not only allowed for Samuel's productivity as a writer, but also supplied a much-desired refuge for Olivia and the girls. On her part, Olivia's letters reveal and affirm her constant love and longing for and trust in her older sister, the dearest little woman in the world.